Welcome to a bonus edition of 100% Hockey. Millard is off, John Shannon here, as we take a look at one specific series, the Buffalo Sabres and the Boston Bruins. Buffalo won Game 1 with a comeback in the last 6 or 7 minutes. They couldn't do the same thing in Game 2, so they go to Boston 1-1. And in Game 3 on Thursday night, it is a quieter, simpler game that the Buffalo Sabres play, albeit with a new goaltender in Lyon. And they beat the Boston Bruins 3-1, setting up Game 4 on Sunday afternoon at TD Garden. The Bruins, in many ways, with their backs somewhat against the wall, because if Buffalo wins the game and go up 3-1, the Sabres are a difficult out at home. Kevin Dupont of the Boston Globe, Mike Harrington of the Buffalo News, with me to discuss this series in depth. Who starts in goal for the Sabres? When do they go back to Luukkonen? And then at the end, a little bit of discussion about a couple of names that are in the GM world. One Bruin assistant general manager, Adam Gold, and former Sabre general manager, Kevin Adams. Both have been talked about a great deal in the last week for jobs with Canadian teams. So it's Bruins Sabres, Dupont and Harrington on this edition of 100% Hockey.
Face Off Inside the NHL returns, taking you deeper behind the scenes than ever before. See it all from the star-studded Four Nations Face Off tournament.
Us against the world, boys.
To the adrenaline of the Stanley Cup playoffs.
I'm scared of you guys.
With candid interviews and backstage access, experience the sacrifice, the rivalries, and the determination that define NHL greatness.
Just when I thought last year couldn't be topped, here we are.
A new season of Face Off Inside the NHL. Watch now only on Prime Video.
Welcome back to a bonus edition of 100% Hockey, joined by Kevin Dupont of the Boston Globe and Mike Harrington of the Buffalo News, who are covering what I think, when the playoffs started, was one of the more attractive series for so many reasons. You know, the resurgence of the Bruins, the amazing story of the Sabres, and the style of play we might see in the series. But after 3 games, and the Sabres win in Boston, Mike, did we see a change in the style of the way this series was being played after the first 2 games in Boston? Rather?
Yeah, John, it's interesting to me how we really haven't seen a lot of the Sabres team we saw in the regular season. You saw it, of course, for about 6 minutes at the end of Game 1, where they snatched victory from the jaws of defeat. And then you saw in Game 3, I think the Sabres imposed their will on the Bruins more than we've seen at any time in the series. But, Kevin did a neat thing counting up the lead stats, how long teams have been ahead, and I updated it through Game 3. All right, so through 3 games, the Bruins have led for a combined 86-22. The Sabres have been in front in 3 games for a total of 19 minutes and 21 seconds, and they have a 2-1 lead in the series. They pulled out Game 3 in the third period. That was their best period of the series, I thought. Ultimately, they are the more talented team. They are the better team. They should win this series, but it's not going to be easy. It hasn't been easy, and we have to see in Game 4. The Bruins are right there. All they have to do in Game 4 is win a game at home, which they've done 29 times this season, and you're down to a 2 out of 3. But it's, the Sabres are learning a lot of their players about playoff hockey. This is not the same as the regular season. It's been difficult. Props to them for pulling out a 2-1 lead to this point, but they realize now they are in for a long march if they want to get anywhere near the Stanley Cup.
And where do you think the Bruins' level of play is, Kevin?
Not anywhere near where it has to be. I know that lead time is interesting in that it forces one team to be playing uphill. But I thought games 1 and 2, Sabres came out far better in both games, far better in terms of the first 10, 12 minutes of the first period. Bruins get lucky with that crazy goal that Geekie throws in on his back, pitchfork backhand from center ice.
Which, let me say, Kevin famously wrote in the Boston Globe that Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen bucknered Geeky's shot. I love that.
Yeah. Hey, when you got to go to misery, I got a deep well of misery.
It's tough to complain about the Red Sox being miserable after what they did the first 2 decades, and the Patriots and the Celtics. You can't talk about misery. You're talking to Mike Harrington here. You're talking to Mike Harrington about misery.
Yeah,
seriously.
I'm not going to let you get away with that, Dupe. I mean, come on. How many duck boat parades have there been in Boston since 2002, man? Enough.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of a new age, but for those of us who grew up Red Sox fans and hobbled from one century to the next, it's it's
actually it's funny if it's funny you say that he bucknered him, because I was of the belief, because we all grew up in North America playing baseball. We all played baseball. We all played how to play the short hop.
Yes.
Luukkonen grew up in Finland, didn't know how to play baseball. He didn't play baseball. He didn't know how to play the short hop. Didn't know how to get in front of the puck.
Yeah, he let the hop play him.
Right. Yeah. So there's the issue. Luukkonen did not play baseball, and it hurt him when it came to that play in Game 2.
We'll send him for some remedial work, right?
Actually, so that leads me to the question when we can explore the Bruins. Jeremy Swayman has been pretty good through this series, has he not?
He has, yes, yeah. Swayman's been their best player, and by far. After him, I'm hard pressed. I think Arvidsson has had a good game 2 and 3, even though he didn't put away that penalty shot, and those are, as we know, those are coin flips at best. They're not where they have fallen short, and where I think Buffalo was smarter last night is play at the net, hunger at the net, be around it. Especially if you look at those last 2 Boston power plays, third period, game's there to tie, game is there to win, and they're looking for these cute little one-timers at 10, 15, 25 feet, rather than, scrum, get down there. And Buffalo was doing that. Buffalo was doing that all night long, and didn't get to Swayman with it, but made him pay for it. So that has traditionally, and this goes back a long time now, way before this iteration of the Bruins, but that's been something of a Boston trademark. Wasn't there last night. And if they don't find that, and there's not a lot of guys in the lineup who can do it, the guy who comes to mind that they might be able to insert there, and he played, this is a long time ago, played power play, Western League, Calgary, Kastelik. Mm-hmm. He is a specimen. That doesn't mean he can retrieve the puck, he can put it away, but somebody's got to do something. And last night, if you noticed, they finally pulled Elias Lindholm off of the first unit, and again, invisible. So they've got, they have had a habit this year of playing well when you've seen them at their worst. To me, I thought they were given the stage. I thought they were at their worst last night.
Do you think the Sabres learned anything from the first 2 games at all, Mike?
Well, the one thing, John, that struck me was both teams, I think Buffalo in Game 1 and Boston in Game 3, there's a lot of pressure, strangely as it sounds, and as good as they've been, both of them, there's a lot of pressure being at home. I thought the Sabres felt a lot of pressure. They had the weight of the city on their backs in Game 1 when you're talking 15 years without a single playoff game. And I think it weighed on them a little in Game 1, and there was a big pressure bubble they got rid of finally in that third period. But I do think all 3 of these games have been instructive for the Sabres to learn how to bounce back from a win, which they didn't do a great job of in Game 2, and to learn how to bounce back from a loss, which they did a much better job in Game 3. They have to learn the ups and downs of the playoffs. And in my columns in the Buffalo News and on Twitter and that, I made a point before these playoffs started. I basically said to people, do you know how many games the Florida Panthers lost the last 2 years when they won 2 Stanley Cups? How many games did the Florida Panthers lose the last 2 years in the playoffs, John?
Well, I was going to say 7.
They lost 15 games.
Okay.
You lose a lot of hockey games in the Stanley Cup playoffs when you go through, as the Panthers did, 8 series. And you have to be able to bounce back and ride the up and down of a series. And that's what the Sabres haven't done in 15 years. They haven't been in a series. So they've learned in these first 3 games, it's been a bit of a roller coaster. And now as they point to Game 4 Sunday afternoon, they have to keep riding that roller coaster again. And if you can get the roller coaster to be a lot more like this than this, you'll have a lot more success in the playoffs. But, there's a lot of playoff experience on the Sabres. The narrative they're inexperienced isn't really true. But what is true is the key guys, Thompson, Dahlin, Samuelsson, Luukkonen, none of them had playoff experience. This is all new for them. They're learning on the fly.
Can the Sabres play how they played in the regular season and win? Or do they have to change?
They can do it some. It's just tougher. Ice in general is tougher to find in the playoffs. It took a long time to find some ice in Game 1, obviously. But they've played multiple styles. The idea that they play river hockey, sure, they've played river hockey. They've also played tight hockey. They've also protected leads, things you need to do in the playoffs. They've also played hard, physical, in-your-face hockey, as we saw against Tampa. So the one really top quality of the Buffalo Sabres is you cannot pin them to one style. They can do it in multiple ways. And I think that's what portends success for them in the playoffs, especially if they stay healthy and get goaltending.
Same question to you, Kevin. Can the Bruins play the way they played in the regular season and win?
I think they can, because the goaltending is on. So once you've got that, if you don't have that element, as you well know, all bets are off. But yeah, they won a lot of tight games. I think these are all going to be tight, over the course of 45, 50 minutes, no blowouts. So Swayman is in it. What I didn't see, 2 things I didn't see from them that I think are imperative. You've got to get shots. And down the stretch, they were outshot in 6 or 7 of their last games. They've been outshot in each of these 3 games. They've been out attempted in these 3 games.
By a lot.
That tells me they got to spend at the very least. It tells me you got to be at the other end of the ice. You can't always be in your end. There were times in Buffalo, I thought the ice was tilted Titanic-like to the other side. So they've got to do a better job of that. First of all, getting down there, and then they've got to do the trench work that is really the sweet work that we love of the playoffs. The haul it to the net and try not to be denied and do the face wash stuff. All the great things that we love in the playoffs. I haven't seen that from them really at all for the 3 games. So they're going to have to find that. They might not have it in their game. I didn't see much of it this year. And then that will speak to personnel.
But when you look at Janot, when you look at Zadorov, when you look at Kastelik, these guys aren't ballet dancers.
No, they're not. But 2 of those guys are 4th liners. So take that for what it's worth. Of course, last night the 4th line was the best line in my estimation. Yeah. But they're not your power play fancy guys and moving it. And again, at some point, those power play fancy guys do have to do the old trench work. So yeah, they have it in there. They've got that heavy stuff, but it's at the lower end of the lineup. Zadorov, I'm glad you bring up. He's an interesting case. He got one hell of a shot. He's also got one hell of a propensity to take stupid penalties. That's another issue.
Mike knows all about that with that guy.
Yeah.
Way back when, 10, 12 years ago, when he was a kid in Buffalo, he did the same thing.
Yeah. So that's in the DNA. And, as the coach, you've got to live with that or figure it out. What I would like to see them do more, and it's probably too late or may be done out of necessity. Boy, he is one specimen to watch when he wheels in the offensive zone, which is not his job, right? I mean, they've got him, he's got him with the long stick, and they want him to be kind of Chara Jr. back there, and all that's good. And he does a lot of good things on that end. But there's not many guys in the league that if he goes for that foray, he's a frightening prospect. So maybe that's something they can activate him off the point. If it is, they're not going to do it a lot. I'd like to see them do that more with McAvoy. They don't do that a lot with him. We haven't seen much of him in this series in terms of imposing his will and using his talent. So there are pockets here they can use. But I think the main issue at the moment for the Bruins is, and has been for now 85 games this year and 82 games last year, they really don't have a number one center. And they paid for that in Elias Lindholm. And last night at crunch time, they pulled him off when they really needed him most.
From a Sabre perspective, Mike, anybody underachieving what you thought was going to be a factor in this? I mean, are the guys that, I mean, Tage Thompson, we could sit here and talk 40 minutes about Tage Thompson. That's not an issue. But is there somebody else that, gosh, you expected to be a bigger factor that isn't in this series so far?
Yeah, Rasmus Dahlin is playing his normal ice time. He's got 1 point in 3 games, and 1 point in 3 games is a blip in the regular season. It becomes magnified, of course, in the playoffs when you had 74 points in the regular season. I don't know if he's a little banged up or what's going on there. He's not really controlling the puck like we've seen. He's not engaged offensively like we've seen. So we have to see what's going to happen here going forward with him. So that's something that jumps out at me right away. The power play continues to just be, the Titanic. They're in 2010 when they got upset as the division champion, they got upset by the Bruins in 6 games. They went 0 for 19 on the power play. What are we at here? I think it's 0 for 14 in these 3 games, and they're at 0 for 35, 0 for April overall. So they got to figure that out, and that's part of Dahlin's issue. He's on that power play unit. But guys, to me right now, one of the big stories in this series has been the work of Lindy Ruff. First of all, he's got that Cheshire Cat smirk going on every day in the press conferences. He's got a good deadpan every day, and he's kind of liking the matchup with Marco Sturm, a rookie head coach, and he's letting Marco Sturm do all the complaining, and Marco Sturm's got his guy's back. I like that. But Ruff has done the job there, and he pulled the switch. He pulled the shoot on the goaltending, and that's a tough thing to do in the playoffs. And Luukkonen had 1 bad period. It was a bad period, including the geeky goal. And Ruff had no problem pulling the shoot. And here's the difference, guys. This is what this team has done all year. They went 17 games alternating Lyon and Luukkonen. So they have full confidence in both guys. And when Luukkonen struggled a little in Game 2 and they lost, I fully expected them to go to Lyon in Game 3. And not a lot of teams would have done that. But this is how Ruff has run this club all year. And who was potentially the best player in Game 3 was Alex Lyon. He did a great job. He's certainly going to play again in Game 4. But Ruff has to figure out this power play. But, he got that, and he got 2 points out of Noah Ostlund, who came back in out of necessity with Norris hurt. But Noah Ostlund was coming in anyway. Ruff was going to pull the shoot, I think, on Josh Dunn. And I always like following, John, what Noah Ostlund does because Ruff likes his two-way game. He's a young player, very good defensively. He's got great hands. We saw the pass to Byram. We saw the empty net goal putting through Pasternak's legs. I always follow Noah Ostlund. Why? He was the first-round pick the Sabres acquired in the trade for Jack Eichel. So if you want to see this team develop, the Jack Eichel trade was Tuck, Krebs, a draft pick they turned into Greenway, and a number 1 pick where they drafted Noah Ostlund. He doesn't like the comparison. It's going to follow him forever, just like Thompson was the guy they got for Ryan O'Reilly, and it followed him when he was a young player. But Noah Ostlund's creating a nice career on his own. 1-1 in his first playoff game was huge.
He's been really impressive, Mike. I do want to touch back on something. I think you mentioned this when you were stealing my chocolate chip cookies last night in the press room. That you felt those 4 defensemen are playing too safe.
Yeah,
you still feel that way?
Yeah, I think they were better in Game 3. The joke, Dupe, is the Tortorella joke, safe as death. Well, yeah. Even Lindy talked about that. We don't want to be safe. Between Dahlin, Samuelson, Byram, and Power, those guys have been maniacs all year. They have cycled the puck in the offensive zone. They've jumped up on the play and created on-mad rushes. And I haven't seen a lot of that in this series. I think they're kind of still dip in, Dahlin especially, they're dipping their toes into the water. Now, game 3, to see the kind of game Byram had, getting them a big goal, that really helps. And let's not forget here, even though he's still very young, Byram won a Stanley Cup with Colorado on a pair with Eric Johnson, where he was a significant player in that series, had an assist on a Nathan McKinnon goal in the clinching Game 6 at Tampa. So I think they're leaning on Byram a little here to get them through some of the rough spots, because this is all new to Dahlin, Samuelsson, and Power. And the more those 4 defensemen get comfortable, the more Buffalo becomes the Buffalo we've seen for the last 4 months.
Where I've really liked them is they're on the defensive end, is they get it out, right? The Bruins come in, the Bruins get their one chance or half a chance, and then it's moved right out. So they're doing that. But I agree with you. If they unlock that confidence and really start to use the puck at the other end, then that'll be tough for the Bruins.
Game 4 of this series, Boston and Buffalo, is Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. More with Dupont and Harrington on 100% Hockey after this.
With the NHL app, you can listen to every NHL game right from your phone. And with home and away broadcast feeds, you choose your way to listen.
And he scores!
Whether you're at work, at the gym, or stuck in traffic, the NHL app puts you right in the action all season long. Every team, every game, everywhere you go. Download the NHL app and never miss a moment.
Don't forget to subscribe to 100% Hockey on all your favorite podcast platforms or on YouTube. Mike Harrington, you talked about Luukkonen, you talked about Lyon. Alec Lyon is an amazing story, really, when you think about it. A journeyman goaltender that everywhere he goes seems to make a difference. I mean, he was the goalie of record that got Florida into the playoffs. He tried to do the same thing in Detroit. That didn't work. Obviously has played a big role in Buffalo, and then gets shuffled off somewhere all the time. He can't get the long-term commitment from any team. My question about him is, how long do you stay with him? Are you with him until he loses?
Probably. That's probably what's going to happen. They'll go back to Luukkonen if Lyon has a bad game. But to me, it's either Anthony Mantha in Pittsburgh or Alex Lyon in Buffalo as the top free agent signing of last summer in the entire league in terms of having impact. It was a great signing. They got him on a 2-year deal, and he's certainly played great on the ice, in goal, in the crease. But Alex Lyon is a significant factor in this dressing room. A 30-something. They needed more adults in the room here. He's become a significant factor with this team. And that's something you really can't understate. He's become a significant factor with Luukkonen as well. And I think that's more than they even expected to get here. Now, his play on the ice has really called for it. And I think one other reason, guys, why did Ruff pull the shoot on Luukkonen? Partly because it went that way most of the year, but Alex Lyon had a 10-game winning streak on the road, which was one shy of the NHL record. And I think they felt that he was going to be more suited to deal with the craziness of TD Garden the first time out of the box than Luukkonen. And we saw it in 2023. I mean, the Florida Panthers do not become the Florida Panthers without Lyon getting them into the playoffs by 1 point over the Buffalo Sabres. And then they upset the Boston Bruins, Lyon starting that series until Bobrovsky took over. He's been a big factor already all season in the dressing room. Now he's a factor again on the ice, and we're going to see him in Game 4. And if he keeps playing, it could be a long run for him in Buffalo in these playoffs.
It is contrary to what most teams
Absolutely.
are thought to do when you think about. And we saw, that year that you're talking about, we saw Jim Montgomery, the coach of the Bruins, decide, I'm going to stick with one guy for the first 6 games of that series. Is that right, Kevin?
That's right.
Yeah.
and in the end, it was a mistake. But the concept of sticking with one goaltender in a series is something that seems to be changing now in the NHL, although I'm not sure why.
And the other thing, John, is that keep in mind the history of Lindy Ruff here. This is not how Lindy Ruff rolls. Lindy Ruff is the guy who ran Ryan Miller out 76 times one season. He's had Dominic Hasek and Ryan Miller for all those years in Buffalo in the net. I know he did go through a situation like this in Dallas with two goalies, but for the most part, Ruff is not a shuffle him in and out guy. And this season, at age 66, Ruff has evolved into a shuffle him in and out guy with these two, and he's fully confident in both of them. You know, he's the one telling the media and the fans, we're good. We like both of them. Don't worry. Don't freak out. And the people are a little uncomfortable at times, especially with Luukkonen, and Ruff hasn't been. And I think that's been a big factor.
Well, on the other side, Kevin, what's the learning curve for Marco Sturm during a Stanley Cup playoff series?
That's a really interesting question. I thought he did an excellent job during the course of the season. For first-year coach, NHL coach, that said, he had good 3 years at Ontario, the American League. I think so much of it is how you handle team temperament. I think he's done a really good job at that. I haven't felt there's been any gross mismatches here in terms of one line against the other or positionally. When they've been at their worst in this series, in terms of handling the pressure, was the starts in Buffalo. I thought Buffalo had great starts. Maybe he could have done a better job of either in terms of personnel or tempo or matchup or whatever. But no, I've generally been impressed with not everything he's done, but pretty much everything. I think he's done a really good job. And back to Mike's point, even at 73, if I had Hasek on my roster, I'd roll him out every game too. And Marty Brodeur, I'd have him out there every time.
We just don't have those guys in the league anymore. There's only a couple of them.
Right.
We've lost a lot of goaltenders in the last few years to retirement, and that whole wave, and you have a bunch of different guys now, and it's kind of like pitching in baseball. These goalies are now groomed to play 50 games a year instead of 65, and it makes a big difference.
That's right. And that's where I was going to go with that is, so, we took for granted that they were in their 60, 65, 68 games in the regular season. Now it's 55 and maybe 58, and maybe we'll get there with the 84 game schedule. Oh God!
Don't you get paid by the game?
Oh,
Kevin?
Yeah. And I get extra when they go to overtime. I don't know if you knew that.
Hey, we got rid of some preseason games. I'll take 2 more regular season games to cut the preseason every day of the week.
Yeah.
Between Kevin's tweets about the leads and then his fridge alerts, I'm happy. That's all I can tell you. Because
we can't have fridge alerts. There's no fridge alerts in the preseason, Dupe. I mean, that's why we need to have 2 more games.
And that way I know how long I can walk the dog before I come back for before the overtime period. I think it's important.
Amazing how important that is to some people. Yeah, I know it.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at the stats from Game 3. David Pastrnak, 21 minutes, -3. Mm-hmm. Where's the temperature on Pastrnak, Kevin?
The fans are very. I'm surprised. Of course, I experienced this with Bork too. The fans would be hard on Bork because he turned it over. Yeah, he turned it over. He was handling a biscuit all night long. It happens. Yeah. That's it. In Pasternak's situation, I think more than anything right now, and I felt this post the Olympic break. I thought his game was tired. I think his game is still tired to a degree. He's still a brilliant player, but from prime Pastrnak to what we're seeing, it's not the same. So I think there's some fatigue in his game, and I also think there's a physical fatigue. I got to believe at this point he's grown tired. Not that he would ever say it, but not, to be blunt, not having Bergeron, not having that guy who can really make the line, make the play, be in the right place, not be denied the puck in either end. They don't have that. And so they modified the power play this year to put him, rather than just exclusively a shooter, usually at that left dot. They've moved him around. They've made him more a passer. I have no problem with that. But what is he at his best? We know what he is. He's the guy who can, rip it in as Geeky does. Guy who can rip it in, and he's not doing that. He is losing it a lot, but I think that's a function of just not having a number one. They may be forced here in short order to move Zacha up there.
Then you're compromising what has been their best line for the last 20 games in Middlestat, Zacha, and Arvidsson.
That is correct, and that's the devil on your back, right? But they may be forced to at least try it for a period and a half or something, and because he is such a critical part of the offense. I like that second line. I didn't see much from Middlestat last night, but I'm not going to pin that on Middlestat. I didn't see a lot from any of the, if you will, the top three lines.
And the other thing, John, you have to think about, and what Dupe's point is right, we have to watch all these teams for player fatigue. I think a lot of these guys who went to the Olympics, we're going to have to see how they hold up here through the course of the playoffs. And Dahlin is one of them. And you do wonder about, he didn't have his Olympic break. He had to go to Italy and play in that stressful tournament. How do they hold up through April, through May? And it's going to be a factor to watch on every team.
The underlying added factor to that is, for a number of these guys, this is the second year they've done it, right? They did Four Nations. So
right.
Four Nations duty, Olympic duty, 82 games. It's going to 84 next year. I don't know if I mentioned that. This is where I'll interject my brainstorm, which will go nowhere. But if I were the league, and especially if I was the Players Association, I would, around these best on best tournaments, allow some cap relief and some roster management relief, that 10 days into the tournament and 10 days out of the tournament, you could bring up a couple of American leaguers to give some of these guys some air. And of course, you can't do that now with the way the cap is structured because of the money. But I think if it's so important for these guys to go, and if I were 18 or 20 or 25, it would be important to me too. But the overall picture is, for those, especially the guys who've done double duty here 2 years in a row, it's unmerciful.
So the Sabres win Sunday afternoon, Mike, because?
They win Sunday afternoon because Alex Lyon becomes the best goalie on the ice, and because Rasmus Dahlin in the defense imposes their will on the Boston Bruins again.
Same side for you, Kevin. Bruins win because?
Bruins win because they finally figure out you can't bring a butter knife to a knife fight. You got to get in there. You got to crash the net. You got to look at some of that tape last night. Buffalo is getting second and third whacks on Swayman. No penalty. Second and third whacks, puck frozen. They're still chipped. That's the way you play. Look at Tage Thompson. Tage Thompson's goals the other night. He had the 2 goals. He's right there. He's right where you got to be. You can't be looking to score 10, 12, 15 feet. That was all great with Islanders and with Canadiens and Oilers, and in a league where you could score from distance. This is hazmat work. Get in there.
Before we let you go, I just have to ask both of you about a single individual, nothing to do with these playoff series, but they are the talks of certain towns. Mike, I'll start with you. Kevyn Adams, permission been granted by the Sabres for Vancouver to talk to him. When you heard that, what was your reaction?
I'm not surprised. Kevyn Adams' stock is going up since he was fired in Buffalo because of the way this season developed, and he put together most of this roster. But to me, Kevyn Adams should be going the Jason Botterill route, taking some time to learn how to be a GM, to learn under someone, be a director of pro personnel. His pro personnel moves were excellent. His drafting was excellent. His moves during the season where he kind of froze were his big problem as a GM. I would not be going back to another GM job right away. And can Kevyn Adams be a GM in a Canadian market with a fiercely angry media core? I'm not sure that's the case. And I think that really is a negative as well. I would have thought Kevyn Adams more for a place like Nashville than a place like Vancouver. But I do think it shows his stock is up in NHL circles because of the way this team developed.
By the way, in English Bay, there are a few palm trees.
Right, there are palm trees out toward Vancouver.
Yeah, there are a few palm trees in English Bay in Vancouver.
And there's a lot of taxes in Canada, too.
And Kevin, we people in Toronto have read the name Adam Gold a few times, who is Don Sweeney's one of his key assistant general managers. What do we know about Adam Gold?
Well, Sweeney runs a very subdued ship here, so we don't know a lot from a personality standpoint. I do know that he's good, hand in hand with managing the cap and making the parts work that way. I don't know, honestly. I don't know how he stands on what's the single most important part of being the general manager. And Mike has essentially touched on it here. Who can play? If he's got that eye, I don't know. And I'm not saying that with any judgment, because I just don't know. You're not allowed to talk to the assistant coaches here without permission. The cognoscenti up front really keep a low profile. I would be thinking more Jamie Langenbrunner, who's Sweeney's right-hand man. I thought he did get a tickle in New Jersey. New Jersey made a very quick change there on their general manager. But Langenbrunner, I think, has the eye. And for me, that's the most important thing.
Well, the fascination with Gold is he's a Toronto boy, right? So that's why I went to university here, and as a lawyer, went to U of T for that. But as Mike talked about with Kevin, having the gravitas to be a manager in a Canadian city is at a different level than playing or doing the same thing in an American city. I think purely from a pressure point of view, correct?
Yeah, and I think that's a big factor. I thought, you're going to put a first-time GM in Toronto. I mean, it seems like they're going that way, but boy, that's a big risk. I know they just had a veteran in there; it didn't go well, but you see a place like Toronto and Vancouver running first-time GMs might be tough. And even Kevin Adams, who struggled at times with the media in Buffalo, it's a different animal in a Canadian market for sure.
What I don't see, and I don't know if Vancouver needs this. And I got spoiled here. We had Sinden as a general manager. Mike Milbury was moved into the assistant GM role. Mike O'Connell, not so much. But I love the guys who are out there. I like this in coaches too. Hitchcock, a prime example, not a general manager. Guys who live it, talk it, aren't afraid to be out there. Aren't afraid to make mistakes either. Make them and own them and move on. So I don't know where I'm kind of describing a carnival barker here, but that's my business. I want those guys, but.
What was that Tortorella saying? What was that Tortorella saying? You said, Mike, safe as death, right?
Safe as death.
Well, right now it seems to be the NHL is going through a phase where they think general managers safe is good. Safe
in terms of personality?
Yeah.
Yep.
There's, I do want a guy that's not boisterous, but I do want a guy that can actually communicate.
Yes,
publicly, and it's particularly to both of your points. In a Canadian city, it is part of the job. It is part of the job, and you don't see that very often right now, and that's why I think we're getting into this world of we're going to get a technocrat to run the hockey department and go from there and see what happens. Boys, thanks for this. Game 4, Sunday afternoon in Boston. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, John,
as always. Good to see you, franchise.
Well, just don't. I don't want to hear stories of press room cookie raids. Those are kind of things.
There was no raid. He offered.
I think you took the whole bag. That's the story. I'm sticking with that story. He took the whole bag.
There was détente in the press room. He offered his visitor a gift.
Hold on. We're in an American city and we use the word détente. I don't think that's not possible. Come on now. Well, I'm getting into that. I'm getting into Dupont's world there. I don't want to do that. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you, boys.
You'll be working for us.
More on 100% Hockey after this.
Face Off Inside the NHL returns, taking you deeper behind the scenes than ever before. See it all from the star-studded Four Nations Face-Off tournament
Us against the world, boys.
to the adrenaline of the Stanley Cup playoffs.
I'm scared of you guys.
With candid interviews and backstage access, experience the sacrifice, the rivalries, and the determination that define NHL greatness.
Just when I thought last year couldn't be topped, here we are.
A new season of Face Off Inside the NHL. Watch now only on Prime Video.
Special thanks to Mike Harrington and Kevin Dupont for joining me on this special edition of 100% Hockey as the weekend starts and hockey continues. Ottawa with its back against the wall on this Saturday afternoon. Carolina looks pretty impressive, and you have to think that the Hurricanes will try to end that series as quickly as possible. We have talked about it many, many times. Good goaltending, and Freddie Anderson has been solid for Carolina, but ending a series quickly and staying healthy. Injuries are a factor. Obviously, Jake Sanderson is an issue now for the Senators, and I'm sure that there are players on both those teams, as well as the Bruins and Sabres, heck, as well as the other 12 teams that are involved in the Stanley Cup playoffs that are nursing some level of injury. So Bruins Sabres, Sunday afternoon at TD Garden, Game 4. Thanks for listening to this special edition of 100% Hockey.